So who would have thought last year that Ferrari would end up dominating this way in the first race of the season? But let's be honest, folks, this has happened before. We've seen this happen in 2017, we've seen this happen in 2018. Is this the year that Ferrari finally gets it done? Now, I know the answer, right? We all want it to be yes, but there's a lot more things that we have to discuss. And there's a lot more of that we're going to discuss along with this very point on this episode of the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium. So welcome along. My name is Soumil. I'm the host of The Driving Force on Disney Plus Hotstar, joined by Kunal Shah, the former marketing head of Force India, which then became Racing Point, which then became Aston Martin, and has now become a very fast but very slow green machine. Nothing to do with Kunal, though. That's just the way things have ended up for them. But welcome on to the show, folks. And seriously, Kunal, I read something very funny on Reddit, which is the best place to go to, of course, if you want funny stuff. That Ferrari left Mission Winnow to
Podium, right? You mean?
That's true. That's true. That's true. Good plug.
Sorry,
but
you.
I read somewhere that Ferrari... Totally okay. If it's an interruption like that, totally worth it, right? But it's amazing. Someone wrote that Ferrari left Mission Winnow to pursue Mission Win Now. And we knew that they were good, but they were this good. That's just outstanding.
I think it was a really good opening race of the season because there was so much anticipation about these cars. How will they qualify? Will they be able to race together? Will it give us, entertainment? Will they allow, drivers to fight? So irrespective, I mean, not considering which teams were in the battle, just the very fact that we had an entertaining race is actually a very good start to this era of Formula One. And of course, like Bernie Ecclestone said, for Formula One to be, more successful, more popular, he needs Ferrari to be winning. So if Bernie was the chief of the sport still, he would have definitely repeated this statement. I think it's great if the wait for Tifosi is going to end this season. It's been it's 15 years. I remember, we ran a graphic yesterday for the Viaplay, viewers, and 15 years is incredibly long for a team like Ferrari. But we know that. We just know that they had the best start to a season since a long, long time. They got the pole, they got the race win, they got the fastest lap. And like, F1 stats guru Sundaram has, become very popular with this particular stat of his that each time Ferrari have scored pole and win in the first race of the season, they've gone on to win the World Championship. And that actually has happened 7 times in the history of Formula One and Ferrari.
Come on, Kunal. You just took the hype train and you accelerated the speed from 100 to 300. That's the lovely work of F1 Stats Guru right there. You can check him out on all his social media handles. But it makes me ask a question, right? Why is this particular race different from what happened in 2017 and 2018, where, remember, they also won the first couple of races? And generally, Kunal, in terms of the atmosphere, this feels different. And is it the pole that kind of adds to it? Because in those couple of races, they didn't really have the pole, and now that it's a 1-2, now that the expectations have been compounded by testing, it sort of feels like the time when it didn't really feel that way in 2017 and 2018.
It didn't, and it's like this. There was always a sense of nervousness about the Ferrari at that time. Different team, even though it was the same red color or a different red color of the car as well, right? There is some air of certainty around this setup. But again, very early days, pre-race and after qualifying, pretty much everyone thought Ferrari at the single lap pace, but not the race pace. But we all saw how that turned out as well. So I think it's a very good start for Ferrari, but let's see how it goes over the next 22 races because it's a long season. And if there's one thing I can guarantee will happen, is that the pecking order will change. It will evolve through the course of the season, Soumil.
Absolutely, but think of it, right? They've got 44 points and their closest rivals, at least on track, have got none. So that's how ridiculous of a gap Ferrari have already, and it's going to be so hard for them to claw back. But just a word on Charles Leclerc and all. That restart was tremendous, and I think there's a lovely thing, right? Whenever Verstappen and Hamilton end up battling, in a way, you kind of felt that Verstappen pushed Hamilton way beyond the limit and kind of took advantage of his sportsmanship and took things a little more seriously. with Leclerc, there's this air of mutual respect in a way. And we saw this in Silverstone 2020. We saw this in Austria 2019. These two guys just make for such a lovely couple. And it kind of adds to the whole point of why this feels different, because Ferrari have won this race after a fight. In Australia, in those couple of years that I mentioned previously, it was just more of a procession, and we were just too happy because Ferrari is winning.
It's very right what you pointed out. The whole air of respect and between Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, because I think it's down to this feeling. They've grown up racing go-karts together. I remember going into this weekend how people were sharing images and videos of them racing in karts. They all know how naughty the other one can get. Mind you, I'm using the word naughty and not dirty. Okay. And in the end, I'm glad they kept it clean, because it was close, and this is despite the fact that Red Bull wanted Max to have just one attempt, like they radioed him. And it was typical of both of them to use DRS, to use all the late braking that they could to get track position. But that Ferrari and Charles Leclerc were just a little too quick for Red Bull to catch up on. And my understanding is that in the previous era of Formula One, there was a lot of tire management that kept going on. Drivers would sit behind 2-second gap, save the tires and then attack later on. This era, at least, of course, based on the first race, I think there is tire management, which is natural, but it's been compounded by what's also called brake management, because Max's attack or repeated attacks on Charles did not come for as long as we would have liked, only because he was also managing his brakes. And, Mark Hughes has put out a very interesting technical reasoning behind this. So it's best you go up on Formula1.com and read it. But that was what actually halted Max's charge for victory. And this includes the fact that Max wanted to have a faster outlap and, whatever else to try and get the jump on Charles Leclerc. And maybe that's the way it's going to go, because Red Bull has a very powerful DRS wing, as we've seen. And the offset between the new tire and the old tire was almost 3.5 to 4 seconds in during the pit stop. So that was another interesting play for us to see. So teams have gathered all this data. They're only going to get smarter with every day that goes closer to the next weekend, because they'll be processing this data, rebuilding their race scenarios, and sharpening their tools that will help them literally from this weekend itself, Soumil.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a good point you mentioned. And Max was furious about it. But it was kind of curious why he didn't quite push immediately, right? After the restart, he kind of backed off, and seems like that was the reason why. But still, the racing was good, and we shall discuss that more in depth. But also, Carlos Sainz, Kunal, very, very close. He was pretty handy all throughout the weekend. Not exactly to the level of Charles, but it's interesting that he's come out and said that a 1-2 for him personally was a bit disappointing. And that's the kind of spirit you want to see there. This means that this could just end up being a lovely battle, three ways essentially, because we now have Max, Carlos, Charles, maybe, who knows, Sergio Perez could join in the fight. This is turning out to be fun.
It is. The top three in qualifying, like we spoke about after qualifying, Soumil, were 0.13 away from each other. And like Carlos Sainz said, if he had to go again, he would have made up the 10th. And, he labeled Bahrain as one of his toughest weekends with Ferrari. So it's all about him figuring out with the team, because at the end of the day, his disappointment stems from the fact that he has a fast car this season. Last season, he showed that he can be quicker than Charles when it matters. So for him to have finished second obviously is disappointing, because he wants to go and get his title as well, add to the Sainz legacy, while also prove Renault and Red Bull wrong in their choices they made earlier on in his career and the likes. And, just to talk about consistency, Carlos Sainz had his 16th consecutive points finish this weekend, which I think is pretty fantastic, Soumil.
Yeah, exactly. And we also have to give a shout out to Abhishek Duckley, because he got the prediction right. He bet on Charles, and that is the one episode that you should also check out if you've got the time to. Now that it's a bit retrospective, maybe you can have a look and compare what we think were the one words for each of the team before the season began. But Red Bull, Kunal, the word for Red Bull was largely to do with the benchmark, the expectation and to carry on the momentum that they built up. But seriously, this unprecedented in a way. As I mentioned early on, they've dropped 44 points to Ferrari, and this just well could have been a Red Bull 1-3 for all we know, had Perez just close up to Carlos Sainz. And the fuel pump, for all we know right now, it's apparently something to do with the fuel pump, which is now known to be a standard part among all the teams. Can we expect this to happen to everyone throughout the season? What's this whole kerfuffle going about?
So first things first, Max Verstappen could have actually had pole position. He lost pole by a very, very narrow margin on the last corner of his Q3 lap. He was actually almost ahead of Charles, and he would have had a very, very narrow margin pole position. Of course, this is only in retrospect. This is after seeing telemetry data. So he could have started from pole, led the race, done his thing that would have been. And by leading the race, of course, he would have had cleaner air, and hence he wouldn't have had all those brake issues because he was saving his brakes from lap 3 or thereabouts. And again, lots of technical reasons behind why brakes were overheating as well. Not going to get into that. Like I said, Mark is better to be the person who's going to read about this. But very crucially, Soumil, the only thing Red Bull could do was try during the pit stops, which they did do so. And talking about fuel pumps, it is a standardized part. But there are two things to sort of keep in mind out here, right? First is, just because I've given you a standard part doesn't mean you use it the same way the other teams would do so. So it's also about how they've placed that standard part. And if that was their placement is a problem within the entire casing that they've got, or the packaging as we call it, right? And then second is, if it is actually a fuel pump problem or a packaging problem, can it be solved, in less than a week's time? Because we've got a back-to-back weekend. We're racing in Saudi Arabia in no time as well. And the third thing, of course, is going to be, if it's a standard part used in a standard way, then could it just be that it becomes a lottery that any team or driver could hit it maybe once or twice or multiple times through the season at any point? And could this be an issue? Because that's also something that's been brewing on the internet, saying, is the FI aware of this? Are the teams aware of this? Seems like they are. And are they trying to sort of find a common fix to it, right? And then, of course, there is this other theory saying the fuel pumps were fine. It was the E10 fuel that actually caused a problem. So we will know only in due course what the issue is. But yeah, Red Bull was literally, they've started on the worst footing that they could have as, Drivers' World Champion team, and got a lot of ground to make up. But the good thing, Soumil, is at least they know they had a car to compete with Ferrari. At least we did not see the two prancing horses prance away from the raging bulls. At least we saw two teams fight at the front, and that sort of gives us a bit of a pecking order, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that makes it feel more frustrating, knowing that you could have beaten them, but you end up with nothing. Yeah, you kind of get the frustration in the Red Bull camp right now, but that's Red Bull. And speaking of Red Bull, speaking of all the battles they had with Ferrari, raceability, Kunal. It's the biggest question we had in mind coming into this season about whether these cars will be good and will we actually get to see some racing. One race in, I think it was decent enough. I mean, it's too little to maybe give a comprehensive opinion on whether these cars are actually better, because, of course, a lot of the battles that we saw were very similar to what we saw in, say, Abu Dhabi 2014, where you have a move down the first corner, cut back down the second, you have a move around the outside of the third. So that's very similar, very cliche in a way you could put it to Bahrain. But otherwise, Kunal, it seemed all right. But what do you reckon? Is this new generation of Formula One car actually better? I mean, many people had complaints about how slow the cars look, which wasn't a problem for me because I watch a lot of Formula 2 and those cars look slow, but they are so much fun in racing. But what do you think about this whole thing?
So first things first, Bahrain is a circuit where we've seen fair amount of overtaking in the past. So we actually saw the same amount of overtakes or thereabouts, I would say. I'm not going by the total number of overtakes. I'm just saying in general, it seemed like drivers who wanted to make an overtake could make an overtake with a fair bit of ease. So that was good. So,
but did you check out who won the Crypto.com Overtake Award though? Or do we not bother with that here?
No, we do not bother with that.
No?
I'm just happy we had
We
a
can
battle.
let it slide.
Yeah, we can let it slide. I'm just happy that we could have the Charles versus Max battle go on for a couple of laps. They seemed like they could follow each other. They could outbreak each other. Like I said, the followability of the cars, if that's the word, if the cars could just follow each other, they seemed more ease they seemed at more ease to do that. The question, like I said, is the whole brake and tire management that sort of goes on. So was it also the abrasive circuit surface of the Sakhir International Circuit? I'm sure it was as well. So we will only see over the next couple of weekends how it all sort of evolves, Soumil, right? But at the moment, it seemed like the cars seemed far easier to sort of be in wheel-to-wheel battle. No drivers were complaining of it being tougher in any particular radio that I sort of heard.
Yeah, I think just the judgment element has to come in because we saw Ocon making that contact with Mick. So that kind of, you can excuse that in a way. Not that the stewards did, and we shall come to that in a second, but that seemed good that we could see some racing go on. Maybe something like Jeddah will prove to be a better example because that's a tighter circuit and we can get a better idea of how much following is possible. But race strategy, Kunal, you and I had a chat before this episode began and we were just really confused to see what in the world just happened, especially with Mercedes, who put on the hard compound on Lewis Hamilton. And when he came out, it felt like IndyCar. And I was watching the race screening live with around 100 odd people. Everyone over there went bonkers because A, it's Hamilton struggling. Of course, they love to cheer Hamilton doing bad. But the second part is just kind of unprecedented, right? We haven't quite seen this happen ever in Formula One for a very, very long time because the blankets were so useful. Now they're taking them away, just adds another layer of struggle. So Mercedes kind of got it wrong, but they still got a podium. So that's just bizarre considering how things played out.
They got a podium purely because of the double retirement that Red Bull had, right? But talking about race strategy, it was actually very easy to dissect the strategy, at least for me. For Red Bull, it was finding a way across the Ferrari car. So it was just like, we will throw whatever we can at the Ferraris to try and undercut them. Because like I said, the undercut was very, very powerful, right? Is that going to remain for the season or not? One doesn't know. But the truth is that was what, Red Bull was trying to do. And they tried it, several times. Sticking still to race strategy, we had Mika Hakkinen on the Viaplay broadcast. So for all those in the Nordics and several other markets where Viaplay broadcasts, you all would have seen Mika made this very, very bold prediction before the race. He said, I think we're going to see a 3-stopper. And I still remember David Coulthard, who was with him, said, wow, that's a very bold prediction. And guess what? That's exactly what happened. We had a 3-stopping race, which just added to the excitement, I would say. And that gave, Max at least 2 more attempts to sort of try and make an overtake on Charles. You could also see it this way, that gave Max 2 more attempts to be even more angry on the radio with his pit crew. So that was actually, I would say that was Max's or Red Bull's strategy. The midfield strategy was fairly simple. The midfield strategy was like, just overtake all you can, who you can, when you can, because there was just so many, overtakes that happened in the midfield, especially the Alfa Romeos. They were driving around the others like others were mobile chicanes, if I may call it that. And Mercedes was just like, okay, we're slow. Mercedes was almost a second slower lap because by the time Pierre Gasly's Honda, had an issue and brought out the safety car, say 12 laps before the end, they were almost a minute down on the lead Ferrari, which is 57 laps, 60 seconds down. It's more than a second a lap slower. And we saw their issues with the hard tire, with the warm-up and Hamilton's outlap and the like. So Mercedes were just very blessed to sort of get a podium on a weekend when they were by far the third fastest car, Soumil. And my mind actually goes back to 2017, 2018, since that's what we started talking about. Because at that time, we had Ferrari versus Mercedes up at the front. We had Red Bull in a league of their own, faster than the other midfield teams, and then everybody else. And it's just that Red Bull and Mercedes have sort of swapped places. So it's Ferrari and Red Bull at the front, and then Mercedes doing what Red Bull did at that time, which is fill up, slots 5 and 6 and pick up the pieces if somebody else up ahead falters.
Yeah, you're right. And from last year, McLaren have just directly swapped with Haas. Alpine are where they are. Aston Martin have maybe done a Williams, but Williams have kind of swapped around with some other team. It's funny, right? It's very simple how things are eventually going about. But I think what's evident is that we thought that this would be closer. Of course, whenever a new regulation comes in, there's always a bit of a gap in terms of how you interpret it. Some concepts will go right, some concepts will go wrong. We saw that in 2014 as well, where we saw clear, distinct groups emerge eventually. So I think they will bunch up. Maybe if not at the end of this year, it'll take some time, but we will see them get very, very close towards the very end, like we did see with this past generation of cars. But interesting how race strategy eventually pulled out. And yeah, crazy how just taking away the tire blankets changed so much and how everything just kind of became so interesting with strategy. But another thing to talk about, Kunal, is race control. Were they fairer? Were they better? We don't quite know how it worked out with the whole VAR system, but at least from what we could see, the track limits enforcement, if that's a thing, was a bit better. We saw it to be a little more consistent all the way through, where they had said that you need to have at least one tire on the white line. That was good. Ocon's penalty was fair. Good start, I'd say. And plus changing any to all cars in terms of lap cars also helps out.
Soumil, despite talking so much Formula One with you all the time, I actually have a question, and I don't know the answer to this. I thought tire blankets were banned from 2024. The original plan was to ban them from 21, then that became 22, and that was pushed forward to 24. So I'm not entirely sure what the issue was. I was on Google as well trying to see what was what. Couldn't get much, but either way, the hard compound had a warm-up challenge. It was clearly it was clearly a compound that was struggling to get into the working temperature, right? But moving on to other things, we had the Alfa Romeos. They had a fantastic race. Guan Yu Zhou, he points on debut. Yuki Tsunoda, another meme doing the rounds that Honda's last manual on how to use the Honda engines was in Japanese, and which is why Yuki was the only driver who sort of was a Honda-powered car that could, finish the race in the points. And I would say I would pick two real stars from the midfield. That has to be Valtteri Bottas for what he did. And then, of course, for, Kevin Magnussen as well. And Bottas even more so, keeping a couple of things in mind. First is he had lack of testing. That Alfa Romeo had so many testing issues, right? He actually turned around and said that the reason why he had a bad start is because they did not get enough time to practice as many starts because of limited testing that he had. And then Kevin Magnussen, his crazy Formula One love affair is only getting crazier. He was another fantastic driver to watch this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And I loved how Gunther Steiner was happy, and he was swearing when he was still happy. So it's fun to see that. But yeah, Valtteri Bottas, very interesting. And I just wonder what could happen if their starts are better too. Because that Alfa Romeo looks like a fast car when it finishes, right? So that's also going to be interesting to see. But good for Zhou Guanyu and Fernando Alonso in the points again. But I was very impressed with Esteban Ocon, Kunal, because even with that penalty, ending up finishing where he was interesting because he was way faster than Fernando. He got the points. Good day.
Yeah, and 4 teams scored double points, Alpine being one of them. So L plan was definitely working as well, Soumil. And I would say even race control was working fairly well. We saw some pretty quick decisions, prompt decisions, clear decisions being made. You can argue that they were not tested as much as Michael Massey was tested last season. But I think it's a good start overall for race control as well.
Yeah, exactly. But Kunal, before we go, moment of the race. What do you reckon it was for you?
The moment of the race for me was Netflix filming Kevin Magnussen all the way from Thursday of the Grand Prix weekend. I think what a perfect time to actually film a comeback such as Kevin's. You know, he had retired from Formula One, and you guys know the drill. But the fact is, Netflix has it recorded, so it's just about making sure that they edit it correctly. Don't add too much drama, because anyway, the real life story in itself is so fantastic. But yeah, clearly Ferrari 1-2 was the highlight of the weekend, I would say. Just the manner in which they got it. And you can hear my daughter. She's also excited. She's going to come here any minute because she's wearing a red Ferrari t-shirt. But yeah, the fact is they had an answer to everything that Max and Red Bull threw at them through the entire weekend, Soumil.
Yeah, exactly. What a fun way that we saw this weekend end out. And for me, the moment has to be that wheel-to-wheel battle between Leclerc and Verstappen. If only it could have gone on for longer, but hey, I'm asking for a bit too much, right? Next weekend is going to be a lot of fun in Jeddah. Make sure you join us right here on the Inside Line F1 podcast and Pits To Podium for our race weekend coverage, which starts off on Thursday or Friday. We'll see when we record that preview episode, but we've also got the qualifying episode now and the race review there as well. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week, folks. Have a good weekend and enjoy your journey on the Ferrari hype train. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.